with psychicprotectionsanctuary.com. Welcome, welcome. I've hopped on about 2 minutes early, about 2 minutes before the hour, just to take care of technical things. But if you're watching the replay, let me just real quick give you the title of what we're going to be exploring today, and then we'll be officially starting our lesson in about 5 to 7 minutes from now. So today we're talking about the 3 most common areas of your life that are impacted by negative spiritual forces. And those 3 areas are relationships, money, and health. And I'm super excited about today's lesson. It's basically 3 lessons in one. And if you're already here live, I invite you to share where you're joining from. And just if you can relate to having an experience of negative spiritual interference in any of those areas, relationships, money, health. Today is going to be a lot of discussion. So I want you to get your mind and your fingertips ready to type whether you're joining live or in the replay. I want to invite you to share your stories and your situations and your questions too. So let me take a second and take care of administrative stuff. Oh, I gotta mute myself. Let's make sure this is working. You're probably gonna hear my voice double. Okay, good. The muting worked. Awesome. Okay. So we always wait a couple minutes to get everybody in here live. And while we're waiting, and I'm looking at the clock, it's about 1 minute after the hour. So, oh, and we have Evelyn. Yes, hello from the Netherlands. Hello there. Wonderful student of mine. So happy to see you. Okay, so we always go over a few announcements at the beginning. And then we get into our lesson. I think you might benefit from having a pen and paper for this lesson so that you can jot down some ideas and then maybe even journal or brainstorm about it later as you ponder how these aspects might be showing up in your own life. But let's get into announcements. So, first of all, I have a lot to cover. I have 2 whole pages of notes. So I am going to be looking at my notes because I don't want to leave anything out. So pardon me for that. Also, this is a YouTube Live. So the nature of YouTube Live is that it does involve more chit chat and, but even though it is a YouTube Live, be assured we're covering really important content. So if you want it all in a bite size in 5 minutes, watching one of my YouTube lives is not it. But I do have a lot of mini lessons on my channel. So if that's your style, then you can go watch those. But we're going to be doing some chit chat at the beginning, and then we'll get into our lesson. We may take the entire 90 minutes to get through everything because we're going to be sharing each other's stories, hopefully. Hopefully you'll be sharing and commenting a lot, and I'll be reading those. We have M joining from Colorado, and Vlad, greetings from Serbia. So good to see you. Okay, so if you're new to my work or if you are returning, just a reminder that you can obtain more information and more resources at the following places if you want to go further or deeper. First place is my website, psychicprotectionsanctuary.com. You can find information about my 2 online programs. One of them is a self-study program. If you're a more independent learner or if you're on a smaller budget, that would be what you might explore. And then my other program is a group mentoring program. That's the way that you can work with me and get my input and guidance. And that is for you if you want more of my guidance, if you want to be working with me personally, and if you really want to be a part of a group of like-minded people who are having similar experiences to you. And that in itself can be super powerful. Also, my books are on Amazon. Some of them are also on Audible. So you can just type in Maya Zahira and you'll find all of the books. And what else? Oh, and then we have this wonderful free YouTube channel that has a couple hundred free classes here. So most of the focus here in these free lessons is all about understanding how all of this spiritual warfare stuff works. And then my programs are all about how to solve those problems. So that's how it's organized, just so you know. But if you want a little bit of both on a smaller budget, then you might check out my books. Those have some really good methods to start you off with. Okay, how are we doing on time? Perfect timing. Let's go ahead and get into our topic. So just to remind you, today we are talking about the 3 most common ways that negative spiritual forces impact our lives. And those 3 ways are relationships, money, and health. Now, one of the reasons why I felt inspired to teach this today is because in my group mentoring program, Spiritual Empowerment Academy, we are beginning a deep dive, several months long, into these topics. So what we'll be covering today here in this free class is to just get you thinking about things in a different way, maybe point out some things that you didn't realize. But if you need real support in these areas, we're going to be covering it in depth in the Academy. And then there are some shorter lessons in the self-study course. So just know, either way, there's more resources if you need more depth. So Vlad says, I've been following your lectures for years, Maya. Your objective and rational approach is rare these days. Wishing your channel the growth it deserves. I really appreciate those kind words, Vlad. I do believe that my channel has been hidden for a few years. And sometimes that is a little bit discouraging, but most of the time, because I'm able to see timelines intuitively, and I have psychic sight, I'm able to see the bigger picture. And so I just keep going. I keep showing up. I keep showing up because I know that right now the channel is very hidden from a lot of people. And there's a lot of reasons for that. But that eventually more people will be finding this information. And there are those of you who are here now, those of you who are finding this channel, those of you who are on the cutting edge, the visionaries who are on the cutting edge of understanding what seems like common sense to us, but is like this breakthrough information, right? So thank you for being visionaries, and your role in all of this is super important. Tammy says, I love the turquoise coloring with the glasses, hair wrap, and shirt. My colors. Yay! Yeah. Thank you. I always appreciate kind words and compliments because, as you know, anytime that you get online and you put yourself out there to the world, there's trolls. And I had a whole bunch of trolls last week, and I was laughing. I was like, wow, the trolls are, it's making my face red. The trolls are really coming out. It was a certain video that I put forth and that got published last week, and I was like, wow, that particular video called out all the trolls. And by trolls, I mean they were saying like really ridiculous things about my appearance, which has nothing to do with the content that we're talking about here. But anyway, thank you for the kind comment about appearance, and for the kind comments for these messages, this information, which is the reason why we're here. Okay. Yeah, and we do have a troll right now. Speaking of trolls, that's so funny. I think that, let me see if I can take care of this. Uh, hide user from channel. Bye bye. These lives have been a riot to adjust to, for sure. Hopefully you guys didn't have to see the crazy messages. Yeah. Okay. So I am going to be looking at my notes. I have a lot to cover with you guys. Grab your own notebook. I think, like I said before, you're going to take these notes and I would spread them out. But I would write one point and then leave several lines and then write another point, because I think you're going to be brainstorming about your own life, about situations that you're going through. Okay, so just a quick summary of this topic. Some of the things in life are just life. Sometimes money is tight. Sometimes there are relationship challenges. Sometimes we get sick. There are all sorts of things that happen in life. It doesn't necessarily mean that every single thing has to do with negative spiritual targeting. Okay, so keep that in mind. We don't want to get paranoid and label every single challenge, which life is about ups and downs. So we don't want to label everything as negative spiritual interference. So I'm going to encourage you to be kind of a neutral detective and see if you can, without being triggered or like getting your emotions wrapped up in it, as you evaluate things in your own life, to see if you can evaluate, is this negative spiritual interference? Is it just life happening? Or is it my own stuff that I'm actually kind of causing things to happen? Or is it some of my own unhealed wounds, etc.? So self-awareness is always important in all aspects of negative spiritual interference. Self-awareness, understanding yourself, knowing who you are. So I also want to point out that in a lot of our free classes and a lot of my paid content, the focus is on more direct, obvious forms of spiritual warfare. For example, a person is under psychic attack or negative entity influence, and they end up experiencing paranormal situations, like they're being attacked spiritually. I keep adjusting my necklace. They're being attacked spiritually. There are paranormal situations going on. Today, we're stepping away from that a little bit and talking about something that's just as important, which is how those very real negative spiritual interferences impact aspects of your life that might seem more mundane. So here's a little tip. Sometimes I give the tips at the end. I'm going to give this tip right at the beginning here. If you suspect any type of negative interference in your relationships, your health, your money, I'm going to encourage you to start doing some type of spiritual cleansing methods as soon as possible, if you're not already doing them. Because I see some students, some of you who are in my programs, who are already doing your methods. So you may already have certain methods that you use, that you've learned over the years, whatever those methods are, or you can learn some in my book, The Psychic Attack Sourcebook, on Amazon. Start practicing those to help take the edge off. Okay, so even if you're not sure if you're dealing with negative spiritual interference, it won't hurt to do some spiritual cleansing. So you can use some of your standard methods. Standard methods, what I mean is like burning frankincense resin, using prayers of protection, that sort of thing. Those are just like your standard basics. And in addition to that, You might also start to explore some of the more advanced methods, which would be like reclaiming your power, revoking negative soul contracts. Like maybe there's a negative soul contract for you to have illness in this lifetime, or there's some kind of permission that you were tricked into. So you're going to work on revoking contracts. You might have some past life connections that are contributing to these issues, ancestral patterns that are contributing to these issues. So it can be a lot to work on. And that's the kind of comprehensive approach that we take in the academy and also in the self-study course. So you don't have to do all of that right away. You can just start with some standard basics like burning frankincense, playing some exorcism music, energy clearing music, doing some standard balancing, like balancing your chakras. Like all of those like basics are going to at least help you a little bit as you try to manage these issues. Okay, so our focus today is going to be on what these three types of interferences look like: relationships, money, health. And then the methods for clearing them, as I just listed some of them. Going in depth into the methods like would take months of lessons because there's a lot to work on: clearing your ancestry, past lives, reclaiming your power, revoking negative soul contracts, and so much more. And those are the kinds of things that we do in the paid programs. But you're going to learn a lot about what's happening. See, years ago, before I went through my major additional awakening, I've had more than one awakening, maybe you have as well. About a decade ago, I went through a major psychic attack, which really woke me up to this aspect of work. But at that time, I didn't understand these things that we're going to talk about today. So I thought, all these, like, let's say relationships, people showing up in my life, bringing a lot of drama. I found that really confusing. I was like, what's happening? I don't understand. Like, I'm this peaceful person. Why are all these weird people showing up and there's all this weird stuff? And it turns out it was negative spiritual interference. And I hadn't planned on going over this, but there's a process that typically happens when someone is under attack. Sometimes the spiritual attack can just continue to focus long term on one of these three areas: relationships, money, health. Or it can take a specific trajectory where it starts off, there's negative interference in one of those three areas to help throw you off kilter, to get you worn down, to get you upset, to get you ungrounded, and to weaken your system. And then the next step after that is that is often when the paranormal and the direct spiritual attacks might start, when you're in a more weakened, ungrounded, uncentered state. So I do have a video specifically about that, and I will be sure to put that in the description as soon as we're done with this live. Okay, there are also a handful of other related videos which I'm also going to put in the description. There are some videos, past videos about relationships, money, and health, and I'm going to put all of those in the descriptions. So you, even if you're not in one of my paid programs, you can really explore these topics even more deeply. And I really want you to journal about it too, and really think about how these apply in your own life. Okay, so we're going to do each of these categories one by one. We're going to start with relationships. Once again, I want to remind you I want to invite you to share any brief situations if you share a really long story, it ends up cutting off and I'm not able to see it all. So like a sentence about any ways that you suspect or you know that you are dealing with negative spiritual interference in your relationships. So let me get a drink and we're going to get into two subsets of this category. So negative spiritual forces can mess with your relationships. So one subset is all of your regular relationships, family, friends, strangers, coworkers, your boss, your partner, various romantic partners, your spouse, and I think I already mentioned strangers. So it's like the whole spectrum. Oh, I shouldn't have included spouse and romantic because the second subset is romantic relationships. So we have all of your regular relationships, your loved ones, all the way from your loved ones, your friends, your coworkers, strangers, all those relationships. And then the second subset is romantic relationships, whether it's a one-night stand or a long-term partner and everything in between. Those two categories, the romantic relationships and all of the other relationships, they operate a little bit differently, but there are some similarities. So I'm going to go over this. Lyle Michael says, I had to cut off a friend of many years because of their alcoholism. Stayed friends for many years, but then they would black out and say abhorrent things. Yeah, so there's also at least one video on my channel about addiction and how that connects with spiritual warfare. And oftentimes when someone blacks out, it's very common for one or more entities to step into the person, and that's probably what you were experiencing. The person, your friend, your former friend, blacked out, and something stepped in and spoke through him. He's still responsible for his actions, but that's probably what was happening. Okay, so for the first category, all of your relationships, non-romantic relationships, first category. Let's talk about a term that I created a few years ago. The term is secondary psychic attack. Primary psychic attack is when a person, let's say you, are attacked directly by spiritual forces. Like there are negative energies coming at you, or entities, or black magic, or what have you. That's primary psychic attack. Secondary psychic attack is where you have another person involved. So let's say there's the targeted person. Let's say that it's you. And there's another person involved. That person gets nudged by either an entity or some negative spiritual forces. That person gets nudged knowingly or usually unknowingly. Usually they're unaware and not very awake. They get nudged by these negative forces to say something or do something to you, the target. So there's this secondary attack sort of thing happening. There's the secondary element. So it's important to understand that, like I said, a lot of times people don't even realize. It doesn't have to be somebody who is blackout drunk or practicing dark aspects of the occult or, like satanic practitioner, or it doesn't have to be anything like that. It could be just somebody who's not very self-aware, or maybe they are pretty self-aware, but they're having a moment where they're not feeling well, they're tired, they're stressed out, and so it's easier for them to be nudged. Again, this can be loved ones, friends, but even a perfect stranger walking along the street, and you're minding your own business, that stranger might suddenly be nudged to say or do something. So let's talk about the kinds of actions that any of these people might take. So it could be that they are nudged to say something that dark forces know will trigger you. The person is like being totally unaware and clueless, okay, usually. And they are guided to say something that will upset you or trigger you or throw you off. Or it might be that they're guided not to say something, but to do something, take some kind of action that's very triggering. Or they might do something to sabotage you. So an example might be your partner loses your car keys on the day when you have an important interview that's going to like be a big breakthrough in your life. And let's say that person, your partner, wasn't trying to be mean. They were just being like an asleep, like NPC, not non-player character, like not paying attention kind of person. Okay. But then there are also the people in the mix who they are aware that they're causing harm, and they have a lot of unhealed inner wounds, and the dark forces love to work with nudging people like that. So the person might be jealous or hostile toward you. They might have feelings of jealousy or hostility. So therefore they are going to say triggering things on purpose because they're trying to hurt you. So they're partially aware of what they're doing, but they're not aware that there are negative spiritual forces in the mix. They just know that they hate you. They don't like you. They don't know why, because they're not self-aware enough to know why. Okay, so that's another aspect. Another aspect are the whole category of narcissists, sociopaths, and psychopaths. And we're going to have a whole class all about those three. I think it's scheduled for September 2026. So we're going to dive deep into that. But basically, people who have major personality disorders, and those are also favorites of the dark forces to send people like that, whether it's into your regular relationships or your romantic relationships, to send people like that intentionally into your life to create abuse scenarios, because there's definitely going to be abuse. And then also, in addition, as we're talking about secondary psychic attack from any of your loved ones, instead of being nudged to say something to upset you, they might be nudged to do something that actually harms you, that puts you in danger. So I'll give an example that you might not have thought of before, because you're probably thinking of your close relationships, difficulties with your close relationships. So I'll purposely point out something that is a little bit different. About how many years ago? 6 years ago, I was living in Tucson, and I took my car to a new to me mechanic place, and I just needed an oil change. That's all. And I took it in. Long story short, it took a very long time. And then they came out and said, oh, your tires need to be rotated and this, that, and the other. And I'm like, okay, well, I was getting ready to go on a road trip for my work. I was going to go travel to Phoenix to do a spiritual event. And I'm like, okay, well, if it's time, like I haven't had them rotated in a really, really long time, so go ahead. That's fine with me. Well, in hindsight, they did not rotate the tires correctly. They did not put the tires on correctly, because when they were done, they said, we can't figure out why your tire light is still on. We've checked and double checked everything, but we can't figure it out. And we've determined that everything is fine. Just ignore the light. So I'm like, okay, I'm not sure what's going on. So thankfully, I made it to and from Phoenix the following weekend. Everything was fine. But a few days later, I was driving in town in Tucson, and my back tire literally became completely torn up and thrashed. And I took it to a different place, and they looked at it, and I described to them what happened at the other mechanic, and they said it sounds like they didn't put the tire on correctly, and all the driving that you did, the wheel well was cutting and cutting and cutting bit by bit. It was cutting into the tire until finally the tire, like, I had a complete blowout. But when I had the blowout, I was just driving 30 miles an hour on a in town road. But they said if it had happened on the highway, it would have been much, much worse. That is an example of complete strangers being guided to not pay proper attention. And I do believe that was not just a random thing. I do believe that that was orchestrated by dark forces, because there have been a lot of things over the years where dark forces have tried to make it so I can't do my work anymore, or to put me in danger. And so that's an example of when it happens with strangers. And so in the academy, we're actually going to get into a process starting next week of some ways, various ways to mitigate the many aspects of secondary psychic attack, whether it's our loved ones or complete strangers, because there definitely are ways that we can be put in danger, especially if you are a spiritually targeted individual, if you've had a lot of targeting over the years. So next we're going to get into partners. We're going to get into romantic relationships, but I see some good comments coming through. I'm going to read those. Lyle Michael says, okay, I'll check it out. It happened a lot. And so this is about his friend who was drinking, and he would always apologize, but I felt I wasn't helping anything by subjecting myself to his choice to continue drinking. Yeah, I think one empowered option that we have is that we can choose to end or limit certain relationships. Obviously, we can't do that with every relationship, but sometimes that can be an empowered choice. JB says, would you include discarnates in the interference? So I want to make sure we're talking about the same thing. When I use the word discarnate, I mean a human ghost, a spirit that is a discarnate human. And is that what you're referring to? If it is, I would include that. So any type of spiritual being that is troubled, that's what I mean by negative spiritual interference. It can be the dark forces in general guiding someone, or it can be specific entities, even ghosts, discarnate human souls. Lyle says, the awareness is key. Even when I drank before, I would stay centered in awareness. It seems to be that with the people who black out, it's the lack of awareness that is the major issue. Yeah. And I suspect how much you drink would have an impact as well. Lily says, good example. Tamara, being bullied at school and at the workplace is a big one, in my opinion. Yeah, bullying. Yeah. I was planning on talking about this in the academy next week, but I'll talk about it now as well. That for some people who are very spiritually targeted, there's a phenomenon that's not just like a single secondary psychic attack happens here and another one here and another one here. There's that, but then there's also this phenomenon where the targeted individual, no matter where they go, anyone who has negative entity attachments, or even anyone who has a lot of unhealed inner shadow, will immediately hate that person. So the person could just be existing, and I've had this experience. The person could just be walk into a room and just be existing and sitting and smiling pleasantly. And there will be a whole group of people who immediately hate that smiling person. And that is also a form of secondary psychic attack where the person, like all these people, are sending bad vibes or even being unwelcoming or saying nasty things. Yes, you're welcome, JB. Okay, time for a drink. Then let's talk about romantic relationships. Wonder if we're going to be able to get through all of this in our 90 minutes. This is like 3 lessons in one today. Okay, romantic relationships. This can be a major issue for some people, and how it shows up is that the person is frequently paired, the spiritually targeted person is frequently paired with or sent partners who are like either abusive or entity infested or like agents of the dark forces. So the targeted person is intentionally sent people who are troubled personally, interpersonally, or spiritually, or both. There's another aspect of this where sometimes a spiritually targeted individual is paired up with another spiritually targeted individual, and then both of them are slammed with spiritual attack. So that's also something that can happen. Tamara says, it sounds a lot like the empath narcissist dynamic, which is very common. Yes. Yeah, you know, it occurs to me that a handful of years ago, I don't know, I've kind of lost track of time here, but it seemed that I was seeing information about narcissist empath relationships all the time online and spiritual, like on spiritual forums, but now I don't see them talking about that very much anymore, but is still as much of an issue. Okay. And I think there's some comments that are not showing up. Sorry about that. Yeah, Tamara, I read your comment, but now it's being hidden because YouTube is doing too good of a job in managing things. Evelyn says, romantic relationships were an issue up till the point I decided to stay single and do things on my own. Yeah, that is one option, and that is an option that some of my students have made, and then I have other students who work on clearing out the interference, and then they're able to enter into better relationships. So it's up to each person. Another thing I might have mentioned, but I want to emphasize this, is that some spiritually targeted individuals are often sent partners who are possessed by entities. And speaking of secondary psychic attack, I have this thing that happens with my neighbors. I don't know if you can hear this really loud bass, some kind of music playing outside. I have all of my 5 layers of protection around my home, around the property, but they're over in their space, and then what they do over there, they play their music, and there's a lot of weird spiritual activity that goes on over there. But what I'm experimenting right now with is like sending a heartfelt blessing to them every day. Obviously, I don't believe that we should or can control other people, but I think that sending a blessing prayer can be helpful. Anyway, that was going on. I don't know if you could hear it. It's like anytime something important would be happening, they would turn up their music really loud. It's really funny. Oh, that's okay, Tamara. Okay. So this is something that happens with our romantic partners, is that toxic or spiritually hijacked partners are sent our way. This is something that I discovered myself before I saw anyone talking about it. It took me years to find anyone even talking about it. And years ago, I finally did find, what's her name? Okay, I guess I'm not supposed to mention her name because I can't, it's eluding me. But anyway, one of the things that I discovered in my own life was that the partners that used to be sent my way were each infested or possessed, I should say, possessed by a demon. So they didn't have entities hanging around them. That's one thing. That's one problem. Another problem is that the negative entities are inside the person fully controlling things. And as a clairvoyant, as someone who could see energies, but before I really understood this phenomenon, I had different relationships over the years, long-term relationships, and I had situations in each of those relationships where in unexpected moments, I clairvoyantly saw the demon inside of that partner. And then right after, I would be like, okay, we got to break up. Like we can't continue. And that I actually did talk to a healer about it, and her response was to shame me for not choosing well. And I've never talked about that before, but that's it. Her approach was interesting because what I see is that I was very intentional. Like I was very careful. I didn't jump right into things. I was intentional about who I chose to date, but I didn't understand, and I don't think she did either, the way that this targeting works is that they might seem fine in the beginning, and then you find out later that there's a demon or something else running the show. So let's read comments. And what's coming to my awareness right now is there is so much to say about each of these topics and subtopics, and I'm just barely brushing the surface because we don't have time to go into all of it. But I'm just really excited that we're covering this in the Academy. We're going to be going really deep into all of this. But it's great to even just cover the tip of the surface even for now. Okay, let's see. We've got some comments and then we'll go into some more. Tamara says, yeah, I noticed there were a lot of empath and narc videos around the lockdown. Yeah. Then there aren't as many, not as much focus on it. Also, do you think cluster, I think it might have cluster B are disguising themselves more now. So like narcissists, psychopaths, etc., are disguising themselves more now because of more awareness of it. I do think that whether they are cluster B personality type, like narcissist, sociopath, psychopath, or there's some other type of predator, generally speaking, what I've observed in just my own work and my own life is that when people are called out on their abusive or predatory behaviors, they simply get better at hiding it. So I would say yes, they've gotten better at hiding it. Lyle says, are the spiritual people that are sent the entity-attached people meant to help clear them, or more so have boundaries for themselves to not let the malevolent forces into our field? That is such a good question. Here's my perspective, and I encourage everybody to figure out your own way. Like, I'm just sharing my views. I want you to run this through your own filter. I believe that the tendency for spiritual people to think that they're responsible for clearing all of the troubled entity infested people. I'm not saying that that's exactly what you're saying. I'm kind of repeating things that I've seen online. I think that that approach is what I would call codependent. It's dysfunctional. And when someone thinks that, oh, whenever I'm sent a partner that has this, that, and the other, it's because it's this like positive thing, I'm supposed to clear them. That would be the spiritual form of codependency, which is unhealthy. It's about thinking that you're responsible for fixing people. So I would not be taking that approach at all. I used to be very codependent when I was in my 20s, even into my early 30s, and that was something that I had to heal. And so for me in my 50s now, I'm like not interested at all in any codependent patterns. So I'm not going to be fixing anyone. I can, if I'm in a partnered relationship with someone and they're having a difficulty, I can hold space. I can be a listening ear. I can, be a good partner, but it's never my role to fix them. That would be codependent. That's my perspective. So I believe that whenever possible, we should steer clear of possessed and entity infested people. Now, in my work, I'm not steering clear of those people. I'm helping those people. But I'm not going to be wanting to get partnered with someone who's possessed. Okay? Because that's not my client. That's my partner. So there's a clear distinction about that. I would steer clear of those people as much as possible. Again, we don't always know until we're all the way in it and we're in love with them and there's all these energetic attachments. But to try to avoid it as much as we can. Evelyn says, oh, yeah. I think I wasn't supposed to bring it up, though. So that's why it was like blocked from my brain. Lily says, same here, Maya. I saw the demon in my last partner. Yes. I do have some videos that I'm going to post in the comments. In the description. As soon as we're done here on the live, I'm going to go back and post. There's a video about secondary psychic attack. There's a few videos about secondary psychic attack. There's one about spiritual interference in romantic relationships, and there's a couple on health and a couple on money. So I'll post those later. The overcomer of all obstacles says, I've seen the eyes' pupils turn into slits like snake eyes with a person who tried to physically attack me like once, and also have seen the eyes go black many times than others. Yes, me too. Lyle is saying that he's also a Libra. Tamara says, I call it do-gooder syndrome. Well, when I was in my 20s and my 30s, so when I started off in adulthood, I was raised traditional Catholic. And traditional Catholic, the way that I was raised was that being codependent means that you're holy. Like you're like saving people. I didn't even know what I was doing. I was anyway, thankfully I know better now. Tamara says, this has been used a lot in religions, including New Age, to guilt people into staying in dysfunctional relationships. The irony is there's been sayings in some texts to be discerning in help. Yes, I agree. And there's a lot of there are a lot of ideas out there about twin flame romantic partnerships. And that is another class. That's another YouTube live that's coming up in a couple of months. And so you can look for that. I'm going to be going into all about how there's a lot of misinformation out there about twin flames and how, and I think I'll just cut it off at that because I could just go down that rabbit hole now. Okay. So if you're having difficulty in your relationships, obviously all relationships require work. Going to couples therapy can help. But what we're talking about today is beyond standard relationship issues, whether it's with your family, your friends, your romantic partner. This is all about negative spiritual interference. So you can work on spiritual cleansing, grounding, protection. You can do all of that, which will help ease some of those symptoms. But if you're really entrenched in these issues, then you're going to have to do deeper work. And that's just how it is. Also, if you're in a relationship with someone who is possessed or entity infested or one of those toxic lists that we talked about, you're probably going to have to disengage from that relationship, but you can't always do that. Sometimes it's someone that you need their help. It could be someone who's in a helping role, or who comes and helps you, or it could be someone who is who's a coworker, you can't get away from them, or a family member that you can't get away from. So you'll have to find ways to mitigate that. So just acknowledging you can't end every relationship that is toxic, but if it is a relationship that you can end, like if you know that someone is possessed by a demon and you're in a friendship with them, like I had a friend who was an energy healer, and I did not, because I'm not all knowing, I'll never say that I'm all knowing. I'm not all knowing. So when I first met her, I was drawn in a little bit because I really wanted a friend. And she was an energy worker, and we had things that we talked about that we seemed to have in common. She really wanted to do energy work on me, and I let her do energy work on me once, and it clearly caused my body a lot of harm. I was very ill afterwards, and not in a positive spiritual detox sort of way. I was very harmed by what she did. And then later we talked, I don't know if it was like a while later, we talked, we met in person, and she was arguing and really wanting to do more energy work on me. And I was saying, no, I will only let people work on me who are fully educated in aspects of psychic protection and who are able to, who know how to keep their energy clean and clear, blah, 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 blah. And she was getting more and more upset and defensive. And then I saw her eyes turn fully black. And in that moment I said, oh, she is possessed. She has a demon inside of her. That doesn't mean that it's like the Hollywood movies with the head spinning around and the pea soup vomit, all of that. It can look much more subtle. I bet anyone else who knew her in her spiritual healing practice would be like, no, she's perfectly fine. I saw her eyes turn completely black, and that was all I needed to see. I knew, I trust what I see. I know I did not imagine it. I knew she was possessed with a demon, and that demon was what wanted to get its hands on me. So that's an example of the first subcategory of relational attack, secondary psychic attack. So it was not a romantic relationship, it was a friend and colleague that And that demon inside of her wanted to get its hands on me, to hurt me. I think I mentioned earlier, there have been a lot of situations where dark forces have wanted to get me out of the picture so that I won't be doing this work anymore. And I'll just say, the first time that she worked on me, I was very worried that my kidneys that I was going to have kidney failure. That's how much pain I was in. And so I thought I was going to die from what she or that demon did to me. And I wasn't going to let her put her hands on me again. When we were done with that conversation, she stood up and said, "Can I give you a hug?" Which would seem like a nice thing to say, like asking for consent. But in the moment, I thought, man, that demon wants to get its hands on me so bad. And I just put my hand up and I said, nope, I'm good. No hug. No hug. And that was the last time I spoke with her. I did briefly have an ending conversation. But that's an example of how people are used as a secondary agent for psychic attack, for spiritual warfare. So, stories. Evelyn, just thinking, what if you don't know your partner is possessed and you get you have children together? Would that impact the children? So, yes, I'm so glad you asked this. Yes, it would impact the children. It's going to impact everyone. Obviously, you can't completely get away from that partner. You could, you could stay in the relationship and do tons of psychic protection. So that can be doable. It would not be easy. Or you could end the relationship and the official romantic relationship and the partnership or the marriage and simply have a relationship of co-parenting. That's another option. Really, every situation is different and every person would need to make their own decisions about that because it's so complex, and like also keeping in mind how it would impact the children. Sometimes staying with a possessed person can be really harmful to the children, but there are just many aspects to consider. But yes, it would affect the children. It's an excellent example of how complicated it can get, and that it's not always as simple as, oh, just end the relationship. But sometimes we are, like, if we're just dating someone and we're emotionally attached, but there's nothing besides that really keeping us there, that's when I would really encourage the person to work on disentangling energetically from the possessed partner so that you can get out of that relationship and move on, because those types of relationships are not easy. Evelyn is saying, I mean, would that demon or entity have an effect on the children? Yes. Yeah. And what I'm saying is, yes, the demon would have an effect on the children. There's a whole slew of different kinds of things that could occur with a situation like that. Some of I don't think I can really get into that here. It would take us a little off the path, but it can affect the children not just emotionally, but spiritually in a variety of ways. But if someone watching this is in that situation, you can do all sorts of things, like literally prayers of protection for your children. That in itself is extremely powerful. So keep that in mind. Vlad says, Maya, I'd love to see you on Danny Henderson's GSIC conference channel. She often interviews fascinating people, and I think her audience would really appreciate your story and insights. I'll write that down. It's funny. I'm not embarrassed to admit that I have reached out to a lot of different podcasts, and I actually had one podcast person who is a very nice person, had me on a few times, and then said that I make his subscribers very angry every time I come on because I talk about false light and about discernment, and they don't like that, and it makes them really mad. And so I haven't been on again, but I wish all of them very well. So there have been a lot of people that don't want me. I know that's not personal. It's like that's just where they're at. So I don't know. I'm writing down this person. I don't know. I'll have to research and see what this person is all about. I've had a lot of people over the years say, "Oh, you should be on so and so's podcast," and the answer was no. They didn't want me because they were featuring a lot of people a lot of other podcast guests who channel entities, and that was not a match for them. They didn't want me speaking against that. So we'll see. I wrote down that person's name, and we'll see. We'll see. One thing you could do is make a comment on some of that person's videos and recommend me. Because it's one thing for me or my team to reach out, but for some of their subscribers to be commenting and saying, "Hey, you should have Maya Zahira," that can be really helpful. I'm also a big believer that a person's podcast show is their own, and so if they have a certain vision for what they want on that, that's totally fine. I believe everyone can have their own vision. So we'll see if it connects or not. Thank you for this suggestion, Vlad. Okay. It's the top of the hour. We've been going for an hour now. I think we'll get through the next two a little bit faster because they're not as complicated as they are complicated, but they're not as complicated as the relationships. Number 2 area that is heavily impacted by negative spiritual interference is money. Money. The money and finances, and let's also include resources. Like if a person is chronically experiencing a lack of resources, it's not just money. Okay? And it's not, I'm just not into the prosperity preaching of like, we can all have $1 million. Like maybe that's true, I don't know, but that's just not where I'm coming from. With all of this, I think that each of us can prosper at different financial levels. Some people can prosper, like I'm a very simple person, obviously, I'm not fancy. And I can prosper at a lower level and feel happy in my life and feel like I'm abundant, and it's different for each person. So keep that also in mind. So what feels poor to one person maybe doesn't for another person. So also remember that it is totally normal in our construct of reality. It's totally normal for money to ebb and flow and fluctuate. It's totally normal. Even if you are the most super high vibe and you're doing all the prosperity work that's so popular right now, all of the like law of attraction, perfection, doing it exactly right. It is normal in our construct to have ebb and flow. It's normal to have months where there's a little more money. It's normal to have some months where there's a little less money. It's normal for the car to break down. If it's an old car, that's normal. Like, it's going to break down sometimes. There are things that are just kind of normal common sense. Also, in our world, money is just challenging. Like the cost of food is crazy right now. So if you're having trouble affording the food that you normally would, that's not necessarily spiritual warfare against you personally. It might be spiritual warfare against humanity, where there are human dark forces that are causing humanity to not thrive and causing many people throughout the world to starve to death in certain parts of the world. That's about human dark forces that are run by spiritual dark forces. But if you're having trouble affording groceries, it's probably the construct of the reality that we are in, right? Finding a job is more difficult now, especially with online applications and AI and all that stuff. So if you're having more trouble finding a job, that's not necessarily a direct psychic attack against you, but so just keep all of that in mind. We don't want to assume that any hardship is just coming from dark forces against you personally. So having an awareness, what you want to do is look for patterns. If there's a pattern of job losses, or a pattern of extreme bad luck, or sudden financial collapse with no logical cause, or chronic ongoing poverty, which I know some of you who are here live have had many of those experiences. And even if your bank account or your finances get hacked, or like some part of your online world that deals with money gets hacked, or there's some type of financial sabotage, or your money is stolen, all of those things could be aspects of psychic attack directed at you. So this could be an aspect that someone is actually sending a psychic attack, someone who's jealous. There could be some black magic coming your way, or it could be that you are generally a spiritually targeted individual, and so there are aspects of the dark forces that have essentially, they'll put programs in your energy so that you are just struggling to survive constantly and not able to thrive. And that's actually something that happens with not just one person, but a great deal of humanity is kept in that state, so that humanity as a whole isn't able to fully evolve spiritually to the point where we could otherwise. So also keep in mind self-responsibility. So for example, if you go and you gamble your money away, or you frequently spend way beyond your means, that's about logical consequences. Now, I'm not judging. We all have certain things that we struggle with. But so if someone went and gambled and they lost all their money, that's not like, oh, dark forces are out to get me. That's like, oops, you gambled and you lost your money. There's a problem there. Or you had an issue with chronic overspending. That's an issue that's more of some inner healing that's needing attention. Okay, let's see. So that's more about normal logical consequences that occur when someone makes choices that maybe are not the best financially. And again, there's no judgment. It's just about keeping an awareness, like, are you sabotaging yourself? Usually you're not doing it on purpose. There's just some inner healing and understanding that needs to take place. Or is this some type of spiritual warfare coming from an external source? Okay. So let's take a break from that for a second. We'll read comments. Lyle says, I took finances so personally through my Saturn return, but I just clicked recently that it's not personal punishment. Yeah, for me, throughout my life, I've always been on the low end of income. But one interesting thing that I discovered was when I moved from an area that wasn't a good match for me spiritually, and I moved to Arizona, which is a better match for me astrologically, my income went up. Now it's still on the lower end. It's still below average of a lot of people, but it's way better. It's way better simply from moving to a location that is very aligned with me energetically. So that's something to keep in mind, that even if you have factors working against you, or even like ancestral or past life factors that are keeping your finances low, or there's psychic attack in the mix, dark forces targeting, all of that kind of thing. If you move to a more optimal area, which I know not everyone can do, but if you move to an area that's better for you, then it can help. It can help your health, your money. It can just help with, it just improves everything. It's not necessarily going to, help you have millions of dollars all of a sudden, but it's definitely going to help stabilize things and improve things. So, and that's called astrological cartography. So if you want to look that up, and you can have a astrological cartography reading to find out which parts of the world are more optimal for you. And you might notice that things like health and money and other things may go more smoothly for you if you're living in a more energetically optimal place for you. Guys, I feel like I'm going to sneeze any second now, so if it happens, apologies in advance. Tamara says, but he talks about money more than just from a physical perspective. I don't listen to a lot of modern day prosperity preachers, but I think a lot of his teachings were adopted by late preacher. Lily says, yes, location is key. I agree, Maya. Okay, let's talk a little bit more about money. So a person could be dealing with negative spiritual interference in their money or resources because there's a psychic attack coming from a person, black magic, dark occult practices coming from a person who's maybe jealous or wants to punish you. There could be an entity attachment or multiple entity attachments that are trying to keep you from thriving and keeping your money. My perspective is, it's not about being rich, because I'm not rich. Far from it. It's not about being rich. It's about, like, do you have the resources to have your needs met? If you don't have the resources to have your needs met, then you're going to be struggling. And so whether it's black magic, psychic attack, entity attachment, the idea is to keep you in struggle mode. I remember, how many years ago was it? Like maybe 18 years ago, there was a handful of years that I was so severely poor that I was living in a place that had no working toilet and I had to use a bucket. So that's part of my background. And I lived there for 5 years because I did not have enough money to move. And so for me, that was coming from actually a combination of dark forces, interference, keeping me down, and also several people who were jealous were sending black magic, curses, and that sort of thing. And I didn't have the level of knowledge that I began to develop about a decade ago. So I didn't understand that all of that was happening. But just know that when I'm talking about money, like if you're struggling right now financially, I truly empathize. I literally had to crap in a bucket for 5 years. That's how poor I was. And so I'm just thrilled that I have a home that has a working toilet. I'm happy with simple luxuries like a working toilet. So can you relate to money blocks or resources being blocked. Any type of resources being blocked. And also, I am going to post a video in the comment about, or in the description about money blocks caused by negative spiritual interference. So this is a video from a few years ago. So if you're wanting more information about that, you can go deeper with that one. So Tamara says, can this relate to the first one on relationships? Like ending a dysfunctional relationship, removing tentacles can remove that obstructions. I'm not sure if I totally understand your question. But if you're asking if like removing energy cords is a good approach. So if you're removing the if you're removing the energy cords, any negative energy cords, can that remove the obstructions? It depends, because if the other person is not working on their stuff, then you're only going to get so far. Not sure if I answered your question or not. Okay, she says, for example, even ending a dysfunctional relationship, moving to a new location, as you mentioned, not only bring new opportunities, but also allow you to see new opportunities. Yeah, so it can change your mindset, so you'll be more open to new opportunities. Yes. Tamara says, I can definitely relate to what you are describing, Maya. Thank you for the information. Yeah, so in the academy, we're going to be covering money in a few months. And right now we're going to be focusing on relationships, but in a few months when we get to the topic of money, we're going to be exploring some processes that you can do to help mitigate some of those financial blockages, obstacles, etc. Okay, so let's talk about number 3 way that dark forces can interfere with your life, and that is health issues. So there are those of you who can really relate to this, and some of you might not currently relate to it, but I would encourage you to hang in there with us. Keep watching, because you could be in perfect health today and something could happen tomorrow. We hope that doesn't happen, but this is important information for the future, just in case, because negative health issues can happen to anyone, despite what New Age spirituality teaches, that like people who are high vibe don't get sick. Guess what? Anyone can get sick. And I could go down a whole rabbit hole about how annoying that belief system is, because I literally have known people who they were so I am going to go down a little rabbit hole there. I've personally known people who were such staunch believers that whatever you focus on, that's what you attract to you. Don't speak anything negative. Don't speak about illness. Only focus on positive health, and you can be in perfect health. You don't even need glasses if you truly believe that you don't need glasses. And there's one person that I'm thinking of in particular who was someone who her profession was she was an energy healer, and unfortunately she died of cancer. So, and I feel weird about even saying this, because it's very unfortunate that she passed away. But I remember her telling me, Maya, you don't need glasses. Just believe. And believe me, I've tried all of it. Like, I was totally into the movie The Secret. Whenever that came out, like 18 or whatever years ago, during that era of my life, like I was doing all the things. And there was such genetic sludge regarding the energetics of illness running through my family line, that despite all of the positive thinking that I did, that sludge still ran downhill to me. Like, I still ended up dealing with some major illness issues. And so that was even when I was doing everything right. And then this one healer that I'm mentioning, who truly believed, like really believed in the law of attraction, still passed away from cancer. And there was another person in my spiritual community who was very much like that. She had a stroke. And when she was having her stroke, she said to the people she said out loud, and the people around her heard her say, "I do not consent. I do not consent." Because she was like thinking that only things that she believes are things that can happen to her health. And she died of a stroke, or she died of the effects later of the stroke. And I just have story after story after story. So this whole idea that you can control your health with positive thoughts. Now, do positive thoughts help? Yes. I will say that through my own health journey with the genetic sludge that I've had to work through, that if I always was thinking negative and I never had hope or belief in getting well, then that's not going to serve me. But there also needed to be space for grieving and experience and the hardship of the experiencing of suffering and symptoms. So anyway, I went down that side rabbit hole. I am going to be talking with someone in a podcast interview later this month, and hopefully that will be published by July or maybe sooner. We're going to be going deep into talking about health and spiritual warfare. But one of the aspects of health and spiritual warfare is that when people who are critically ill or chronically ill are bullied by either people in their religion or New Age. So in Christianity, it looks like people saying, well, you don't have enough faith in Jesus and that's why you're sick. Or in New Age is saying, well, you just need to vibrate higher. In other words, you're low vibe. You've been doing it wrong or whatever. And then people in the holistic movement, well, you're not on the wrong diet, or you're not on the right diet. So all these people are being used as agents of dark forces to cause someone who's suffering to not receive support. So all these people who think that they're being high vibe are actually in the midst of being agents of dark forces. So if someone is suffering from a critical or chronic illness, they are suffering. Let's just be real. Like, it's an experience of suffering, going through illness, symptoms, pain, grieving of the life that you used to have, all those things. And to have people say, well, you caused it because of your own low vibration, or you just didn't believe in Jesus enough, or you must be a sinner, or you must have done something bad in a past life, so you're being punished. Like, all these things are so super non-supportive, and those are aspects of secondary psychic attack, actually. But let's get into the actual health issues. So we're talking about physical illness, disease, even injuries, physical conditions, and even aspects of mental health like mental illness, addiction issues. All of those can be health issues. All of those can be in the category of the health issues that we're talking about. So when it comes to negative spiritual interference, dark forces, any aspects of dark forces, can either cause the illness, or the illness might already be there and the negative spiritual forces cause that issue to become worse. So it's either caused by or worsened by negative spiritual interference. Now, let's keep it grounded and remember that if someone is experiencing an illness, it could simply be that your body is signaling unresolved emotions or traumas, or that there's some that there are lifestyle aspects that need adjustment. Maybe someone is eating really bad or living a really high stress lifestyle, and they start to have heart issues. That might not be negative spiritual interference. That could be a need. Like the body is wise. Your body is wise. It's giving you signals of the need for some lifestyle changes. And also, in our construct, all beings die. This whole idea that, like, if you're high vibe, illness is never going to happen. Everyone is going to either die in an accident or of natural causes or illness. That is part of the construct that we are in. And so, and we're also in a construct where there are viruses and bacteria and pathogens, and some of that is actually exacerbated by negative spiritual forces, but some of it is the natural construct of the Earth planet that we're on, where people get colds and viruses and that sort of thing, seasonal colds, that sort of thing. It might not be negative spiritual forces. So also, I'm going to say something that is often overtaught and is given as the reason for everything, and I don't think that's the case, but in some circumstances, illness can serve as a teacher. It can force us to slow down. It can force us to live a more intentional life and that sort of thing. And even if there are negative spiritual forces that are causing the illness, at the same time, that illness can still serve as a teacher. And I know that was the case for me in a lot of ways. So I'm definitely not trying to sprinkle sugar onto a crap sandwich and say, oh, this is all good, you chose it. Like when you're in the middle of suffering greatly with a terrible illness. But I do think it's important to acknowledge that, sometimes there is a lot of spiritual deepening that occurs, a lot of personal deepening that occurs from having the experience of illness. Like, it definitely is very humbling. So a lot of times the spiritual people that I was speaking of earlier, who end up, who very much believe that only low vibe people get sick, and then they get sick with a serious chronic illness or a life-threatening illness. It's usually very humbling for them, and that judgment of others usually goes away, and it's just a very deepening experience. And I'm not wishing that upon anyone, believe me, but there's just no way around it. It is a very deepening experience because it breaks you open to go through something like that. Evelyn says, yeah, health issues, count me in. Yes, she can relate to that. Okay, what are some of the causes of health issues? Aside from the normal causes, what are some of the spiritual causes? Just like money, the money list that I went over. Give me a second. Someone can be experiencing a psychic attack directed directly towards them, directly at them, to cause them to become ill. And I personally knew someone who was an energy healer, love and light energy healer, who was not actually a love and light energy healer. She was actually working with dark forces. And she had a really bad argument with someone, and she did some dark occult work, black magic, against this person. And that person then, by the next day, died of an aneurysm. So That kind of thing doesn't happen nearly as much as people dealing with chronic health issues, or even cancer or life-threatening issues due to a psychic attack. I'm just going to say that usually when it comes to psychic attack, it's more of the mystery symptoms of like having headaches, just not feeling well, feeling anxious, that sort of thing. It's much more rare to see someone actually get cancer or have like a severe chronic illness from just a psychic attack. But I have worked with people who've had that happen when the practitioner or the person sending the psychic attack was a very experienced, powerful, dark occult practitioner. Then it can happen. It's not as common. So I don't want you to worry that like if your neighbor's mad at you that they're going to cause cancer, because they really don't have that level of power. But you might get a headache, or you might, if you have a health issue, that health issue might ramp up a little bit. Symptoms might be a little bit worse if someone's sending some negative vibes. I hope that makes sense, the levels of severity. So also entity interference or entity possession can cause illness. But we need to remember that just because someone has a chronic illness, that doesn't mean that they have an entity. So we don't want to make that assumption, but it can be a type of interference that can cause that. And then of course there are ancestral and past life factors. So I mentioned my ancestry, and I take a moment and send blessings to all of my ancestors, living and past, that I mentioned earlier that there's a lot of dark energy running through my ancestral line that I've had to clear because it has affected the health of a lot of people in my family line, and it was also having an effect on me in a big way. So ancestry is another aspect that can affect your health. And obviously we have genes, we have our genetics that pass down illnesses. That doesn't mean we're necessarily going to get that illness, because there are other factors. There's lifestyle and mindset and all of that, but it is a factor. Past lives, if we've had one or more past lives where we've lived with illness, it can create a pattern, a program that runs through us, and then we keep running that same program. So it's important to work on clearing that. And then also there's an aspect of what I call human dark forces. And this is like, I don't talk a lot about this in our free classes, but there's like the aspects of the cabal, the dark government, dark aspects of military, that there are technologies that we would call directed energy weapons that you can actually easily Google and see that these are weapons that have been created to use in combat against enemies. There are many aspects of technology that have been created. What's not in the mainstream belief is that sometimes these technologies are used against individuals, not in combat zones, but used against individuals. Those technologies can cause illness, physical illness, as well as mental illness. There's something called the voice of God technology, where the device is pointed, from far away, it's pointed toward the person, and it causes them to hear a voice in their head. It's synthetic telepathy, synthetic. And so then the person thinks that they have psychosis, and they don't. So these technologies can cause physical and or so-called mental health issues. So that's another aspect. And I do have people that I work with currently and that I've worked with in the past who have dealt with physical and mental symptoms due to these technologies. Now, that's a lot less common than the general spiritual forces, psychic attack, negative energies being sent to someone that are causing illness. And ancestry, that's another big one. Those are much more common than directed energy weapons, but it is a factor that I wanted to bring up. So, red flags of dark forces impacting your health. If you're dealing with a medical mystery that doctors can't figure out, of course, there are a lot of limits to our current field of medicine. So just because it's a medical mystery might not mean that it's spiritually caused, but it could be. If there is suspicious timing, you had a major breakup of a relationship or a major fight with someone, and then all of a sudden these like horrible symptoms come on, that would be suspicious timing. If you're also experiencing paranormal situations that came on in tandem with the illness symptoms, then that is also suspect. If the health issue is treatment resistant, that could possibly be a sign that there's negative spiritual interferences at play. And also, if the experience of illness is causing if it's causing the experience of feeling tortured, if you feel like you're being physically tortured while your symptoms are ramped up, that could also be a sign of negative spiritual interference. And once again, in the Academy, we're going to be diving deep into this in a couple of months. So we're working on relationships, money, and health. Actually, I think we're going to do relationships, then health, then money. We're diving deep into some methods that can help, but also you can start to experience some relief through your standard self-care, even if it is spiritually caused. Take good care of yourself in all of the ways: your nutrition, your fresh air, your sunshine, plenty of rest, low stress. Consult with your medical person and get on the medicine or the herbs or whatever you need, okay, to help, because it's physically manifested at this point. So you need some physical support, and then you can do some spiritual cleansing as well. So you can get some ideas for that. If you're new to this, get some ideas on that from the Psychic Attack Sourcebook. That'll help get you started. Or use whatever spiritual cleansing methods are aligned with your personal practices. That will also help. But then also we're going to be going a lot more deeply into it in the Academy with more specifics. So also I'm going to be posting a one or two of my past videos about health and spiritual interference in the description. So watch for that. I'll be posting that in the description right after this video ends. Okay. Any final comments, thoughts, ideas before we close out for today? Today was a longer class. Tamara says, same here in my family line. There's been issues with mental health and diabetes. I've heard, and regarding directed energy weapons, I've heard about this when certain famous people try to speak more truths. And then all of a sudden they're screaming down the street, or some other weird stuff that goes on with them, or they end up dead under mysterious circumstances. Yep. Weird stuff. We live in a weird reality, that's for sure. But I always want to remind everyone, this is how I live my life. Yeah, there's this weird stuff going on. There's negative spiritual interference. There's all these dark forces trying to run things and trying to squash us down like bugs, squishing us like bugs. But we actually have a lot more power than we realize. Ooh, okay, I think it fell off for a second. We also have the ability to find joy, and joy is what gives you power over those dark forces. So I'm going to end this extra long YouTube live today by inviting you to do two things. Go back through your notes from today and do an evaluation and really be honest and think about how you might be impacted by these aspects that we've talked about. And then your second piece of homework is also today, go do something that gives you joy, because that directly works against those dark forces. So whether it's stepping outside, go for a walk, get in nature, play with your children, play with your pets, do some art, sing, whatever you need to do. It might seem simple, but it is one of the simplest ways that we can combat the negative spiritual forces, and we can empower ourselves through that simple practice. So on that note, I would like to thank you all for being amazing truth seekers. Thank you for being here. And as always, if you want more information and you want to go deeper, you can find more information about my books and my online programs at my website, psychicprotectionsanctuary.com. And Tamara says, glad to hear this end on a positive note. Yes. Thank you, everybody. Have a beautiful day.